The satin graduation gown feels foreign and heavy on my shoulders, a borrowed skin I don't quite inhabit. The air in the auditorium is thick with the scent of cheap polyester and anticipation, a low hum of proud parents and restless teenagers shifting in their seats. My daughter, standing tall and radiant in her cap and gown on the stage, is a beacon in the blurry expanse of faces. My chest swells, a fierce, protective tide washing over the years, the sacrifices, the endless nights of worry and hope that led us here. This moment. This breathtaking, perfect moment. And then I feel him, standing beside me, a silent, solid weight I've carried for 20 years. My husband, or rather, the man who was my husband, his hand, warm on my arm, feels less like affection and more like ownership, a casual claim on the picture-perfect family unit we're presenting to the world. He leans in close, his breath a whisper against my ear, low enough that only I can hear it, but laced with a poison intended to echo through the deepest chambers of my heart. His voice, usually smooth and confident, drops to a tone that feels almost conspiratorial, a shared secret between us. Except the secret is my failure. Look at her, he murmurs, nodding towards our daughter, his face a mask of paternal pride. All grown up, ready for the world, he pauses, letting the sentiment hang in the air for just a beat too long. Then the twist of the knife. Unlike some of us, still picking up the pieces, still trying to crawl out of the hole, he gives my arm a small, almost imperceptible squeeze, a gesture that to anyone watching would look supportive, but I feel the subtle pressure of contempt. His gaze, when it meets mine, is cold, devoid of warmth, filled with a smug certainty that makes my blood run icy. You'll never recover, you know. Not from this. You lost everything. It's just not in you. The words hang in the air, a cruel counterpoint to the celebratory cheers and scattered applause around us. My daughter's name is called. She walks across the stage, takes her diploma, flashes a brilliant, hopeful smile that pierces the carefully constructed wall I've just built around myself. I plaster a smile on my face too, clapping vigorously, cheering her name along with everyone else. But inside, his words are a live wire, sparking and burning. You'll never recover. Not from this. You lost everything. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. Normal life feels like a story I read in a book, a distant memory of comfort and predictability. We had built a life, he and I. A beautiful house, 2 kids, a comfortable routine. He was the successful one, the ambitious one. I was the supporter, the steady presence. I had dreams once, a business idea that felt vital, exciting. I shared it with him, tentative, hopeful. He'd smiled that charming smile, patted my hand. That's sweet, darling. Very creative. But let's be realistic. The market is tough. It's a man's world out there, you know. Why don't you focus on the kids? They need you. I believed him. Because I loved him. Because he was supposed to be my partner. He was the expert, the one who understood the world of business, the one with the sharp edges needed to survive. I retreated, poured my energy into the kids, the home. The dream became a quiet ache, buried deep. Years passed. He climbed higher, his success measured in the square footage of our house, the luxury cars in the driveway, the prestigious schools our children attended. But the man I married changed. The charming smile became a tool, deployed for clients and colleagues, but rarely for me. The confidence curdled into arrogance, a casual dismissal of anything I cared about that didn't directly serve his image or comfort. My opinions were cute, my concerns overly emotional, my contributions to our shared life invisible. The real unraveling started subtly. Late nights at the office turned into weekends away. His phone became a guarded fortress. The emotional distance widened into a chasm I couldn't bridge. Then came the financial maneuvers. He was always the one who handled the money, the investments. I trusted him implicitly. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband. He was good at this. Except he wasn't good for me. He started leveraging our shared assets, taking bigger risks he never discussed with me. There were hushed phone calls. Worried lines on his face quickly smoothed away when I entered the room. He grew increasingly controlling, scrutinizing every penny I spent, questioning grocery bills, clothes for the children. It wasn't about money, it was about power. He was tightening the leash. The day the bottom fell out wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow, sickening descent. A phone call from a lawyer I didn't recognize, a polite but chilling request for information. More calls followed. Then letters. Debts I didn't know existed. Investments that had cratered. It turned out he had mortgaged everything, the house, his business, even leveraged funds related to accounts that technically had my name on them. He had made a series of catastrophic financial decisions, fueled by greed and arrogance, and then, when it started to crumble, he'd actively worked to insulate himself, shifting blame, hiding assets, leaving me exposed. When I finally confronted him, armed with confusing stacks of legal documents I barely understood, he didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He looked at me with that chillingly blank gaze. Yes, he said, as if explaining a simple truth to a child. Things went south. Happens.
I'm restructuring.
You'll be fine. You'll get something. But I wouldn't be fine. His restructuring meant sacrificing everything I had a claim to, leaving me with virtually nothing. The house was gone. My meager savings, tied up in accounts he'd manipulated, vanished. He left me with the wreckage, a mountain of debt that wasn't legally mine but was certainly tied to my name, and the cold, hard realization that the man I had built my life with had systematically dismantled mine for his own survival. That was the true inciting incident. Not the financial ruin itself, but the deliberate, calculated betrayal that caused it. He hadn't just failed, he had chosen to sacrifice me. The immediate aftermath was a blur of panic and despair. I was in my late 40s, no recent work experience outside of managing a household, staring down the barrel of financial ruin, with a teenage daughter I needed to protect and provide for. Friends offered sympathy, but couldn't offer solutions. Family helped where they could, but they had their own lives, their own struggles. I felt utterly alone, adrift in a storm he had conjured. He moved out, clean and efficient, leaving behind an eerie silence in the house that was no longer mine. He started his new life, his new venture, financed by whatever assets he'd managed to squirrel away, leveraging his network, his reputation, a reputation surprisingly undamaged in his professional world. He was the phoenix, rising from the ashes, leaving me behind in the cinders. I remember standing in the empty living room, boxes stacked around me, the walls echoing with absence. The future looked like a vast, empty plain, stretching out endlessly with no path visible. That dream I'd buried years ago? It felt not just impossible now, but laughably naive. How could I even think about starting a business when I couldn't even afford rent? The early struggles were brutal. Finding a place to live was a nightmare. My credit was a mess, tangled up in his financial disaster. I took a soul-crushing minimum wage job just to keep food on the table and pay for basic necessities. Every hour was a grind, every dollar stretched thin. My daughter saw it, felt it. Her life, stable and privileged until now, was suddenly precarious. That hurt more than my own hardship. Seeing the worry in her eyes, the quiet way she stopped asking for things, the way she tried to seem brave for me. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I worked all day, then came home and spent hours poring over online courses, teaching myself skills I desperately needed. Coding, digital marketing, business strategy. My brain, dormant for so long, felt stiff and slow, resistant to new information. Doubt was a constant companion, a whisper in my ear echoing his words. You'll never recover. It's not in you. Friends suggested I move closer to family, find a simpler life. Settle. Give up the fight. But giving up felt like letting him win. Not just the financial battle, but the battle for my own spirit. He wanted me to be broken, dependent, proof of his superiority. I looked at my daughter, her potential boundless, and knew I couldn't let his narrative become her reality. I had to fight, not just for us to survive, but for us to thrive, for me to prove him wrong. The anger simmered beneath the surface of my exhaustion, a cold, hard kernel of rage that began to fuel me. Every condescending email from his lawyer, every rumor that filtered back about his new, successful life, every bill with his name conspicuously absent but mine somehow attached, it all fed the fire. I started working on my business idea again, late into the night after my shifts and after my daughter was asleep. It was an e-commerce platform focused on connecting independent artisans with a global market, a refined version of the dream he had dismissed years ago. I worked from coffee shops because our tiny apartment was too cramped, hunched over a cheap laptop, powered by caffeine and sheer, stubborn defiance. The rising challenges were relentless. Building the platform required technical skills I barely possessed. Finding artisans willing to trust a brand-new, bootstrapped company was hard. Funding was non-existent. Banks wouldn't touch me. Every no felt like a confirmation of his prophecy. There were days I stared at the screen, tears blurring the code, the urge to give up overwhelming. It felt impossible. I faced sabotage, subtle and insidious. Potential partners I was close to signing suddenly backed out, offering vague excuses. A crucial investor who seemed keen suddenly went silent. Later, I heard through the grapevine that my ex-husband had been quietly spreading rumors, questioning my competence, painting me as unstable and financially irresponsible. He wasn't content with my downfall. He wanted to ensure I stayed down. He wasn't just an obstacle. He was an active, malevolent force, working behind the scenes to crush me. His actions were calculated, deliberate. He saw my small, struggling startup not as a desperate attempt to rebuild, but as a direct challenge to his narrative, his control. And he would not tolerate it. This was the deepening crisis. The initial struggles were about survival. Now, the fight was existential. It wasn't just about making money. It was about proving my worth, reclaiming my dignity, protecting my daughter from the long shadow of his cruelty. His interference made it personal, brutally personal. I wasn't just building a business. I was building a shield, a fortress, a weapon. Everything seemed to be falling apart. A critical piece of code broke, threatening to delay launch by months. The few artisans who had signed on were getting nervous. My funds were running critically low, rent was due, and I didn't know where the money would come from. I was stretched thinner than I thought possible, running on fumes and fury. I sat alone in that cramped apartment, the city lights blurring outside the window, and felt the crushing weight of despair settle over me. It felt like the end, like he had won. One night, lying awake staring at the ceiling, my mind a frantic hamster wheel of problems, a thought crystallized. His company, the one he'd started after leaving me with nothing. It was in the same sector, albeit a different niche. They were successful, well-funded. I knew their market, their operations, their weaknesses. I'd heard him talk for years, seen his reports, understood the inner workings of his world better than he probably gave me credit for. And I knew something else. I knew the truth about his past financial dealings, the ones that had ruined me. I had the documents, the confusing legal papers, the records he thought were buried forever. I had spent months going through them, understanding the convoluted shell game he had played. This was the midpoint shift. It wasn't about just building my business to succeed alongside his. It was about building it to succeed over his. The idea was audacious, terrifying, borderline insane. Acquire his firm? My tiny, struggling startup, gobbling up his established, profitable company? It felt like a fantasy. But the more I thought about it, the more it made a chilling, strategic sense. His company had vulnerabilities I knew about. His arrogance made him complacent. And I had leverage he couldn't imagine. The turning point was the decision. I stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about conquest. The goal shifted from building a modest business to building a powerhouse. I needed funding, serious funding. And I needed a strategy that was not just smart but ruthless. I started working differently. Networking became calculated. Pitches weren't about hope, they were about dominance. I sought out investors who weren't afraid of aggressive growth, who saw the potential for a market disruption. I hired a small, fiercely loyal team. I didn't just look for technical skills. I looked for hunger for people who had something to prove, who understood what it meant to fight. I shared my vision, my fire, but not the deeply personal motivation driving me. They saw a brilliant strategy, a disruptive model. I saw a path to justice. I focused intensely on building out the technical infrastructure, scaling rapidly, securing key partnerships. Every success felt like a small victory in a much larger war. Every late night, every sacrifice, wasn't just for the business. It was a blow struck against the man who tried to erase me. The information about his company became my most valuable asset. I analyzed their financials, their market position, their leadership structure. I knew their strengths, but more importantly, I knew their blind spots. I knew how he operated, his predictability, his overconfidence. I found the perfect financial partner, a private equity firm known for aggressive acquisitions and seeing opportunity in unexpected places. They loved my vision, my platform, but they really loved the potential for a hostile takeover. The plan solidified: build my platform, gain traction, secure the funding, and then, when the moment was right, make an offer he couldn't refuse. Or, more likely, one he would furiously reject, allowing us to proceed with a hostile bid, leveraging the financial irregularities I knew about as pressure points. It was risky, incredibly so. But the alternative was letting him win, and I would rather go down fighting than surrender. The day of my daughter's graduation arrived like any other day, except the air crackled with a tension that had nothing to do with pomp and circumstance. My heart pounded with a dual rhythm, pride for my daughter and a cold, coiled anticipation for the events I knew were unfolding simultaneously. The acquisition wasn't a secret from my core team and the investors, but it was a meticulously guarded operation from the outside world. The final offer had been delivered to his firm the day before. His initial response, as predicted, was one of utter disbelief and contempt. He had laughed, literally laughed, according to my sources. My small, scrappy startup, making a bid for his empire? It was preposterous. He had rejected it outright, publicly dismissing the offer as a joke. But that was part of the plan. The rejection cleared the path for the next step, the hostile takeover bid, armed with the leverage of his past. The paperwork was filed, the news embargoed until the market close, allowing time for final confirmation. My phone, tucked away in my bag, buzzed with updates from my team, each notification a pulse check on the impending climax. And then we were there, in the auditorium, surrounded by proud parents, the scent of flowers and anticipation heavy in the air. My daughter, radiant on stage. My ex-husband, standing beside me, radiating a smug confidence that felt like a physical blow. He had no idea of the storm gathering on his horizon. He leaned in, delivered his cruel line, the one that was supposed to shatter any remaining piece of my spirit. You'll never recover, you know. Not from this. You lost everything. It's just not in you. His eyes held that familiar, condescending pity, the certainty that I was a lost cause, a footnote in his grand narrative. My daughter was walking across the stage, accepting her diploma, the future wide open before her. My hand trembled, not with weakness, but with contained power. My phone vibrated again, a notification flashing on the screen. It was the final confirmation. The acquisition was done. The papers were signed. His firm, the symbol of his success built on my ruin, now belonged to my company.
To me.
I looked at him, his face still set in that mask of smug superiority. The applause for our daughter swelled around us. It was the perfect moment. He thought he had delivered the final blow, twist the knife one last time on this day of celebration. He thought he was watching me crumble internally. I didn't say a word. I just held his gaze, and very slowly I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was cold, hard, and entirely without mercy. I saw a flicker of confusion cross his face, replaced almost instantly by annoyance. He hated when I didn't react the way he expected. Just then, his own phone, tucked into his jacket pocket, let out a series of frantic-sounding alerts. more insistent than usual. He frowned, pulled it out, glancing at the screen, probably expecting a congratulatory message or a business update. I watched his face. The casual glance turned into a furrowed brow. The furrowed brow became wide, disbelieving eyes. His jaw went slack. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sallow, sickly gray. He reread the message, shaking his head slightly, as if trying to clear his vision. He muttered something under his breath I couldn't quite hear, but the tone was one of utter shock, denial. He looked up from his phone, not at me, but wildly around the auditorium, as if the walls held the answer, the explanation for this impossible reality. Then his eyes landed back on me, his expression transforming from shock to a dawning, horrified understanding. My cold smile hadn't been defiance. It had been knowledge. Knowledge he hadn't possessed until this very second. He took a step back, bumping into the people behind him, muttering apologies he didn't mean. His hand ran through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up, a tiny sign of the complete disarray he was experiencing. He was hyperventilating, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out, just a choked, rattling noise. My daughter was descending the steps from the stage, diploma in hand, beaming. The crowd began to filter out of the rows. People were congratulating us on her achievement. I nodded, smiled, accepted their kind words, all while his eyes remained fixed on me, wide with a mixture of horror and incandescent rage. He finally found his voice, but it wasn't his usual smooth baritone. It was a strangled, guttural sound, barely a whisper, laced with pure, unadulterated terror. "No," he choked out, shaking his head. "That's not. You didn't. How?" Then, the whisper turned into a scream, a loud, public, horrifying sound that cut through the pleasant murmur of the exiting crowd. You did this. You bought it. You can't. You have nothing." He didn't care who heard. He didn't care about appearances anymore. His carefully constructed world had just imploded in front of him, and he was lashing out at the one he suddenly understood was responsible. His face was contorted with fury, betrayal, and absolute, total shock. He thought I was ruined, broken, a cautionary tale. He never saw me as a threat, and I had waited until the exact moment his arrogance was at its peak, until he delivered his cruelest blow, to reveal that I hadn't just recovered. I had conquered. The aftermath is a strange, quiet space after the explosion. His public outburst created a scene, drawing stares, whispers. Our daughter rushed over, confused and upset, pulling him aside, trying to figure out what was happening. He was still yelling, his face red, pointing at me, accusing me of everything. Of ruin, of betrayal, of theft. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I stood there, calm amidst the storm. The anger that had fueled me for so long didn't vanish instantly, but it transformed. It wasn't a burning rage anymore, but a cool, clear sense of vindication. He saw me as nothing. I had shown him, and everyone who had doubted me, exactly what I was capable of. The legal battles that followed were messy, protracted, and exactly what I had anticipated. He fought the acquisition with every weapon he had, but the leverage I held, the documentation of his past financial improprieties, was insurmountable. His own board, once loyal, turned on him when faced with the potential scandal and the clear strategic advantage of merging. He was ousted from the company he had built. My company absorbed his, inheriting its assets, its talent, and, ironically, its debts, which we were far better equipped to handle than he had been. I didn't gloat. Not outwardly, not publicly. The victory felt too complex for simple celebration. There was satisfaction, deep and absolute, in proving him wrong, in rebuilding from the ashes he left behind, in creating something stronger and more successful than he ever had, despite his best efforts to destroy me. But there was also a profound sadness for the life we had lost, for the man he had become, for the damage done to our family. My daughter was caught in the middle. She was confused, hurt, struggling to reconcile the father she knew with the man who had behaved so terribly at her graduation and the man being painted in the news. I focused on protecting her, on being honest about what had happened without burdening her with the full weight of the adult betrayals. She saw my strength, my resilience, and I hope that was the most important lesson she took from it all. I run a successful company now. It's demanding, challenging, but deeply rewarding. I built it from nothing, fueled by necessity and spite, yes, but ultimately by a belief in myself I didn't know I had until he tried to strip it away. He thought losing everything would break me. He didn't understand that sometimes losing everything is the only way you find out how strong you are when you have nothing left to lose. He's gone now, out of my life, out of the industry. He's tried to start over again, but without the reputation and network he once commanded, it's been a struggle. He never recovered. And the irony of that is a quiet, constant companion. The pain is still there. The scars run deep. Betrayal leaves a permanent mark. But the future stretches out, not empty and vast as it once appeared, but full of possibility. I built my own recovery, piece by painstaking piece, not just financially, but emotionally, spiritually. I reclaimed my life, my power, my voice. He tried to bury me, but he didn't know I was a seed. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.